Okay. There is a huge difference between today's work and what we have been doing. Do you want to see the huge difference? It's very tiny. It's tiny, but it's huge. Wait. That was really profound. It's tiny, but it's huge. Yeah. Think about that for a minute. Okay. Right there. The equal sign. It's tiny, but it's huge because all of the other problems didn't have equal signs, which means that we are no longer dealing with expressions. We are dealing with equations. Now, as soon as you see the equal sign, you need to get it in standard form and factor, and then do this one extra step that we're talking about. Now, this one is already factored. Do you see that? Yeah. Since it has the equals 0, I then need to do something called solve. Here's how you solve. I'm going to take this right here, b plus 3, and I'm going to set that equal to 0. We've done something similar to this, haven't we?
Yeah, I remember that.
Subtract 3. And b equals negative 3. That's one of my answers. Where am I going to get the other answer? We're not putting them in standard form today because it doesn't say put it in standard form. It says solve. So I get b equals 7. That's it. It'll get a little more difficult. I got 8 problems to do. The first 4 are easy, and then it progressively gets a little bit more difficult. So let's look at this one. This one is already factored, isn't it? So what happens out here?
I forgot.
It's x equals 0. There's an x out there, set it equal to 0. There's no solving that needs to happen. It's already solved, right?
Yeah.
What about right here? X minus 7 is equal to 0. Plus 7, and I get x equals 7. This is so difficult, isn't it? All of these problems, just so you know, every single one of these problems will have 2 answers unless you have a problem like this. Do you see that exponent there? Yes. That exponent really means I have... You have to write it twice. You write it twice. Now, I said every single one has 2 answers. From here, I get k minus 4 equals 0. I'm going to add 4. And I get k equals 4. It technically does have 2 answers. It's just the other answer is also going to be 4. Right? Right? It has a special name. It's called a double root, or we could say a multiplicity of 2. But I really don't care to get into that here. You can just say this. Okay? You don't have to, you can list it once or twice. I don't care. I'm not going to mark you down for either. But just know that everything does have 2 answers. Even when you're listing it once because it's the same answer twice, there's still technically 2 answers there. Okay? All right, what about this guy? This guy's already factored too. Yeah. Out here, do I have an answer out there? No. Why not? Because if I said 3 equals 0, does that make sense? No. No. And is there an x or an n to solve for? No. No. So this does not count when we're talking about our answers. Only where there's a letter is there an answer. So I'm going to get 1 from here. So I need to add 1. Yep. You don't ignore it when there's a letter outside, like up here. You just ignore it when there's a number. Because again, if you set it equal to 0, you get something that doesn't make sense. Up here, I set it equal to 0, and I got something that made sense, right? All right, so I have 6n equals 1. Divide by 6. It is totally fine to get a fraction. Just make sure if it can be reduced, that you reduce it. 1/6 cannot be reduced, so I just say n equals 1/6. There's one of my two answers. The other one's going to come from here. I'm going to subtract 2, and I get n equals -2. Now, another way I knew there was not going to be an answer here was how many answers did I say every single one of them has? 2. And I knew I was going to get one here and one here, so there's no way I could get one from out front. Okay? So far, so good? Now, each one of those 4 that I just did was already factored. Now we're going to get into ones that are not already factored, but we have been spending quite a few days on how to factor. So we are going to factor it until it looks like these, and then solve it like those. Kind of makes sense? So looking here, I have 2 terms. First thing I want to do is take out what they have in common. They have an 8 and an n. So if I take out 8n, what would be left inside?
N.
Because 8n times n is 8n squared. Minus what? 8n times what is 8n? 1. Now I have something that's in factored form, so I can get my 2 answers. If I set 8n equal to 0, I would divide by 8. And what is 0 divided by anything for that matter? 0. So that's my first answer. Answer number 2. Set this equal to 0. And I get n equals 1. So?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's come over here. Now, there is a problem with this. It doesn't equal 0. Oh, crud. I have to have it equal to 0. So what can I do to get rid of that 3? Can I subtract 3 from both sides? Sure, it's an equation. You can do whatever you want to it as long as you do it to both sides.
Oh, yeah.
You have to be fair to both sides. So that gives me k squared plus 4k, and then what do I have when I have -9 minus 3? Minus 12, and then 3 minus 3 is 0. There's the 0 I needed. Now, do they have anything in common that I could take out like I could over here? Can I take anything out?
No, you can't.
No. So what do I need to do?
Forget the snowflake.
Snowflake. Never forget the snowflake.
Yes.
1 times -12 is -12. Put the 4 on the bottom. I need 2 numbers that multiply to get -12 and add to get 4.
6 and 2.
Oh, you could.
-2. Same thing.
Yeah?
Just kidding.
I put a K and I put a K, so my 2 parentheses are K plus 6 and K minus 2.
Dang, I thought we were done.
No, sorry. We're almost done though. Because now I have to go that extra step. What is it about the problem that tells me I have to go that extra step?
It's in parentheses.
No.
Oh, it's in the factory.
It's got that little but big thing, remember? The little thing that's a big thing. The equal sign.
Oh, that thing.
Yep. That's what tells me I have to do this extra step. So K plus 6 equals 0. I'm going to subtract 6. And I get K equals -6. Here's one of my 2 answers. Here I have K minus 2 equals 0. I'm going to add 2. And I get K equals 2. Now, this step right here of setting them equal to 0 should be a very easy step. The hardest type you're going to get is one like this where you have to divide and you get a fraction.
That's the hardest one?
Uh-huh. Other than that, it's just the factoring that's going to be difficult. So the hardest part of this is the factoring. All right, number 7. I'm really trying to challenge you here with 7 and 8.
Yeah, you already challenged me on number 1.
Oh, dear. Just helping you grow.
Thank you.
All right. There's a problem here. It doesn't equal 0.
Oh, Lord.
Just like the last one. So what can I do?
This time it's a negative.
Add 42.
To what? To the negative 19.
Good question. To what? There's nothing over here that's a like term, is there?
So you about to make it.
So it can't combine with the 2x squared. It can't combine with the 19x.
Oh, so it's just there.
It's just plus 42. And he gets his own space. Why does it change? Because the only way I can get a negative 42 to add to equal 0 is to add a positive 42. Negative 42 plus 42. So I have to plus it to the other side. Now, is there anything in common?
No.
Crap. Okay. That means I got to go to my snowflake.
Oh, yay.
Don't diss the snowflake. What goes on the top? Now, some people were still struggling with the snowflake
Me, I struggle.
when you have an a value that's not 1. So if you're still struggling with the snowflake when there's an a value that's not 1, here's your time.
Okay.
Okay? What do I put on the top? I take 2 and I multiply it by 42. What does that give me? 84.
2 times the...
2 times 42. That's A times C. What goes on the bottom?
19.
Negative 19.
Shoot, I forgot the negative.
Now I need two numbers that multiply to get 84 and add to get negative 19. Well, I know it's not 2 and 42. Can 84 divide by 3?
12 and 7. But it's
12 and 7?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Good job.
Jeez, busy. Ain't nobody asked for no.
Now, I need to get those to add to negative 19. So what do I need to do? Both of them negative, right?
I thought a negative and a negative was a positive.
Good point. Let me address that. I thought a negative and a negative was a positive. It is when you are multiplying or dividing, not when you are adding or subtracting.
Okay.
The way I like to think about negative numbers when I'm adding is I like to think about money. Okay? If I owe $7 for something and then I owe another $12, I'm not positive. I owe $19 total, right? When we're multiplying, though, negative times negative does still give us that positive. But when you're adding, maybe sometimes thinking about money makes it make a little more sense in your head. Okay? What do I put up top? This messes with people too.
X.
Not just X. There is an A value.
Yeah, I thought we used the A value.
We did. We're using it again.
Great.
There's no limit to how many times we can use it. So, I have 2x minus 7. Can that reduce?
No.
So that's one of my parentheses. Okay. 2x over negative 12. Can that one reduce?
Yeah.
To 1x and negative 6,
So X minus 6.
which gives me x minus 6. So, now I can get my two answers pretty easily.
Yeah.
This one right here, 2x minus 7 equals 0. I'm going to add 7.
How can you divide?
2x equals 7. It doesn't divide nicely, so just leave it as a fraction. It can't reduce, so I'm just going to say x equals 7 halves. Over here, this one should be easy. X minus 6 equals 0. Add 6, add 6, x equals 6. So what's the hardest part of these problems?
Everything.
No. The factoring is the hardest part. Okay? Okay. Now, this one is all sorts of messed up. So let's see. I talked a little bit about standard form yesterday. And I mentioned that standard form needs to have what? What is standard form again?
AX.
Isn't it ax squared plus bx, you can't see what I'm writing,
Equals.
plus c, and here we're doing it equals 0, right? And I said something in particular about that a. What did I say about it?
You can take it out.
It must be what? I wrote it at the top of yesterday's notes that if I could find, I would show you.
Oh yeah, it must be positive.
Must be positive. See? I did write it yesterday.
You did.
Must be positive. So when I've got all sorts of stuff on both sides of the equal sign, my first thought is I need to make the squared term positive. So I'm looking right here and right here. I have two options. I could either move this negative b squared over here, or I could move the negative 5b squared over here. Now let me get my pencil so I can erase. But if I were to move this b squared, that would give me negative 4b squared, correct? And it's not negative, or it's negative, right? Which I don't want. So I'm not going to move that one. I'm going to move the other one. So instead of having minus 5b squared, I'm going to plus 5b squared. Okay? What is negative 1b squared plus 5b squared? Positive 4b squared. Have I touched the plus 32?
No, not yet.
So let's leave it. And over here, all I'm left with is negative 36b.
So you just move it over, right?
Move what over?
The negative 36b.
I got to move it over to the other side so I can get my equal 0, right? So this is negative 36b. I'm going to add 36b. Now, I'm hoping you're noticing that that question comes up again. What am I adding it to? There is no other b term. There's only a b squared and a regular number. Which means what? It gets its own place.
Let me remember that.
And I put it right smack dab in the middle. Why did I put it in the middle? Because it's the b value of my standard form. Exactly. Okay. So I added 36b so that it could come over here. But b is not a like term with a b squared. And b is not a like term with a no letter. So it's just got to stay as 36b. And in order to keep my standard form, I need the squared term first, the plain old number last, so the 36b has to go in the middle. Okay? You with me?
Yeah.
I think I can take something out before I snowflake.
Four.
You can take a 4.
Don't make me start throwing things.
Yeah, you could take a 4.
I can take a 4 out? Oh, that'd be good. Because then that leaves me with b squared plus what? 9b
Uh-huh.
plus 8.
Equals 0.
All right. I like that because now my snowflake, I don't have to worry about that a value, right? So let's see. Let's snowflake. 1 times 8 is 8 on the top and 9 on the bottom. What are two numbers that multiply to get 8 and add to get 9? 8 and 1. I put b, and there's no a value. Well, technically a is 1, so I don't need to worry about another number up there. So I have b plus 8 and b plus 1, and I have the 4 out in front. Now, from the problems above, am I going to get an answer where that 4 is?
No, so you just ignore it.
So I just ignore it for now. What that 4 actually does is if we were to graph this, that 4 stretches it up and down. Yes, we will graph him. You're welcome. All right, b plus 8. We're not graphing right now. We're not graphing this week. Don't worry. I'm going to subtract 8. And I get b equals negative 8 as one of my answers. And then I have to set b plus 1 equal to 0. Subtract 1. And b equals negative 1. Okay. So, this is a little bit more difficult than what we did yesterday. However, it's combining a lot of stuff that you already know how to do. Okay? It's more practice with the factoring. For our test on Friday, guess what? If you can't factor, you're screwed, basically.
Getting that paper.
Okay.
Practice paper.
We'll get a practice paper probably tomorrow. Okay. But since it's a factoring test, you must know how to factor.
Wait, isn't it factoring snowflake?
Factoring is taking out what they have in common, and it's snowflake. It also could be ones like this, where you have to set them equal to 0, or like this, where you have to factor and then set equal to 0.
How do you do the ones that
Okay.
have two, like just two, not three numbers?
2 numbers instead of 3?
Yeah, I don't know how to do that one.
There's 2 different ways we've talked about. You could have something like this, where it's just a case of taking out what they have in common. Or if you have something like this, we have something called a difference of squares. You can either snowflake, and you would do 4 times 49, whatever that is on top, and your b value is 0. Or you could use the shortcut that we learned, where you take the square root of this. What's the square root of 4x squared? 2x. And then the square root of 49 is, make 1 a plus, 1 a minus. Those are the only 2 types of problems that would come up with 2 terms. Either a difference of squares, or just take something out.
Okay.
Okay? All right. Happy studying.